Hi there, this is Jordan, the stand-up lawyer, and today we're introducing a new segment for the channel called One Quick Question. So, I've been a stand-up comedian for around the same amount of time that I've been an attorney. And a feature of being a comedian on the internet is connecting with a whole bunch of people that I've never met in real life. And the moment that those people discover that I'm a practicing attorney, they take that as an invitation to slide into my DMs and try to score some free legal advice. Hi there, how's it going, buddy? You have no idea who I am, and we've never spoken before this moment, but I see that you're a lawyer online, eh? And golly, I was just hoping I could ask you one quick legal question. Don't worry, just one question and I'll be on my way, bye. And by one quick question, they mean one regular question and 20 free follow-ups. Now, don't get me wrong. One of the things I love the most about being a lawyer is it gives me the opportunity to research novel legal issues. And recently, a friend of the channel asked me a very interesting question.
Dear stand-up lawyer, if a prisoner is sentenced to death or life in prison, goes to the hospital, flatlines, is brought back to life, can they legally argue that they served their life sentence?
Now, when I first heard this question, my immediate response was, obviously not, that would be stupid. But yet, one of the things you learn being a lawyer is there is no legal question too stupid for someone to sue over. So naturally, I did a little research, and one might be inclined to ask, how often could this incredibly specific set of facts possibly come up such that a court would feel compelled to weigh in and affirmatively answer this question? Listen, I've been a lawyer for over a decade, and if I had a nickel every single time a murderer flatlines in the hospital, is brought back from the brink of death, and then argues in court they should be released because they served their life sentence, I'd have two nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. The first time the courts addressed this issue was the case of Jerry Rosenberg, aka Jerry the Jew, a New York mobster convicted of killing two police officers in 1962. As for why he's known as Jerry the Jew, well, his name is Jerry, he's Jewish, and it turns out mob nicknames are not that clever. Sort of like how I'm a stand-up comedian and a lawyer, so stand-up lawyer. It's simple, but it works. So, back to the case. After New York State abolished the death penalty for most cases, the governor commuted Rosenberg's sentence to life in prison. And when you're serving life in prison, you got a lot of time on your hands. Using his time effectively, Rosenberg made history as the first New York inmate to ever earn a law degree while serving in prison. And listen, you gotta hand it to the murderer. This guy took the already unpleasant experience of going to law school and somehow found a way to make it worse. But all that hard work paid off. For you see, Jerry's JD made him quite popular in jail, finding himself the go-to guy to give free legal advice to his fellow prisoners. And Rosenberg was able to use that law degree and legal knowledge in a novel effort to try to get himself an early release. In 1988, Rosenberg petitioned a judge in upstate New York to seek his release from jail. You see, Rosenberg had argued that because his heart had briefly stopped during open heart surgery, at that moment he had died. And that means he could be released from jail since he technically served his life sentence. But the New York judge did not find this novel legal argument to be cute, clever, or persuasive, rejecting Rosenberg's request for an early release on the grounds that he was, in fact, not dead. He was very much alive, quote, as his presence in this courtroom indicates.
Burns was rushed to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead. He was then transferred to a better hospital where doctors upgraded his condition to alive.
30 years later, it was now the job of the Iowa court system to address this very same issue for Iowa murderer Benjamin Shriber. In 1997, Benjamin Shriber was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. In March 2015, Shriber was rushed to the hospital after developing giant kidney stones, which caused him septic poisoning. Now, as someone who has developed kidney stones, it is not something I would recommend to anyone. But as somebody with a strict no murder policy, if it had to happen to someone, convicted murderer seems like someone who would deserve it. By the time Shriber made it to the hospital, he was already unconscious. But here's where his case gets interesting. You see, years earlier, Shriber had signed a do not resuscitate order, which means hospital staff was under strict instructions to not perform any extraordinary life-saving measures or keep him alive with artificial means. Medical staff proceeded to contact Shriber's brother in Texas for clarity, who told them essentially they are allowed to give him medication to deal with the pain, but to otherwise allow him to pass and perform no other major life-saving measures. And yet, despite these clear instructions, hospital staff proceeded to revive Shriber 5 times. That's right, 5 separate times using epinephrine and other intravenous fluids to keep him alive. And once they brought him back to life, they proceeded to perform life-saving kidney stone surgery on a man who had made clear he didn't want to live.
I'm stuck! Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
In April 2018, Shriber sued for post-conviction relief to demand his immediate release from prison, arguing that because he had briefly died in the hospital, he had technically served his life sentence. But the Iowa Court of Appeals rejected Shriber's creative argument, stating that he would not be able to get released from prison by claiming to be dead on the grounds that he was in fact very much alive. Writing, quote, "The petitioner's filing of these proceedings in itself confirms the petitioner's current status as living." As the Court of Appeals explained, it is the job of the Iowa court system to reasonably interpret the intent of the Iowa legislature when it prescribed as punishment for certain crimes that they serve life in prison. The Iowa court rejected out of hand the idea that the Iowa legislature somehow intended to create a get out of jail free loophole for prisoners who happen to briefly flatline during medical procedures. Instead, the court interpreted life the way it is commonly used and understood, such that life in prison means to serve in prison for the rest of one's natural life. The court proceeded to throw some very necessary shade at the convicted murderer, explaining why his appeal was completely without merit. Quote, "Shriber is either still alive, in which case he must remain in prison, or he is actually dead, in which case this appeal is moot." Interestingly enough, though, both the lower court and the Court of Appeals decided that the hospital's failure to observe Shriber's do not resuscitate order was legally irrelevant to the question of whether he had technically served his life sentence. Quote, "Iowa law requires Shriber to stay in prison for the rest of his natural life, regardless of whether he was resuscitated against his wishes in 2015. It seems the Iowa court system did not have a lot of sympathy for the convicted murderer trying to take the easy way out. And on April 7th, 2023, Benjamin Shriber completed his life sentence the old-fashioned way, by dying in jail. And balance was restored to the force. Hey, thank you all for watching this video. Please don't forget to click like on this video and subscribe to the Stand Up Lawyer YouTube channel and the Stand Up Lawyer Substack for more content like this. This has been Jordan the Stand Up Lawyer, and I'll see you in my DMs.